So I was in a very good position to have a leveraged negotiation, which I did. I negotiated both my economical compensation and my level of entry really aggressively. I was really happy. I was really happy at Accenture, at SBC, especially because of the people. The culture was great. So for me to leave, it had to be really worth it, which it was. So the opportunity was just too good to turn down, and so that's why I decided to leave.
Welcome to the Chemical Engineering Guys podcast, a show in which we share stories and tips from chemical and process engineers. We talk about student and professional life, as well as important aspects of products, processes, industries, and companies. But more importantly, what are the paths that these unique individuals are taking in this ever changing world? Let's get started. Hey, what is up, guys? Welcome once again to a fresh new episode in which I'm going to be talking with one of my best friends from my university. We studied a lot of subjects, we suffer study nights and a lot of homeworks. And here is Daniel Bermudez. Daniel, can you introduce a little bit on yourself? Where did you study? What are you doing right now? And anything you think is relevant.
Excellent. Thank you, Manuel. First of all, thank you for having me. I think it's a pleasure and a privilege to be able to join you in this project, this venture of yours. A little bit about myself. I studied chemical engineering with you. Before that, I studied here in Chiapas. I'm from the southern part of Mexico, very small town. Public schools, which I think supposedly are not the best in Mexico, but I wasn't so bad at the beginning of the career. I had a little bit of an advantage because on high school I did a little bit more chemistry than the average person, so I was really good at chemistry in the beginning of our career. And then after 5 years of excruciating pain on chemical engineering, I started working on consulting. I did a first year of internship in our last year of study, so I was working and studying at the same time for 1 year, which was really worth it. It was a small consulting firm over there in Monterrey. And then after that, I joined a large consulting firm, which was very focused on the energy sector, called Schlumberger Business Consulting. I worked there for 3 or 4 years, almost 4 years. And then after that, I joined another consulting firm, which was more general, called Ernst and Young. It's one of the big four consulting firms. It's a great experience, very broad exposure. And then after that, I went back again to the energy industry in a more elite, I like to call it elite firm because it's more well recognized in the industry. Wood Mackenzie is called.
Okay, that's great. So, friends, you have it there. Daniel is right now. What would you say it's the industry? Is it business consulting or is it more oil and gas research of the market, or what exactly is the industry you are working on?
Yeah, the core business of my current employer is research for energy, natural resources topics. So both oil and gas, power and renewables, LNG, chemicals, metals and minings, and all natural resources. So that's the core business. What we do is we gather a lot of knowledge, we create industry insights, we sell subscriptions for the people that want to access our data. We organize the data in tools. And then we have a small arm that has bespoke consulting projects that leverages all of the data and all of the insight that the research people gather and create to have more specific analysis and more specific projects that more more typically are focused on the strategy level of the company. So when a company wants to make a decision as when to invest or divest in a transaction, or how much value they have to assert an asset if they want to both sell or buy, we're usually part of that because from with access to all of the information, evaluation is much more certain. And we were talking about the energy industry, the oil and gas industry in particular, the quantities of the transactions are just enormous. And so having additional set of both knowledge and information can give an edge for a transaction that's so big that the the decisions just one way or the other have huge impact. So they hire us typically for this kind of answers.
I see. So definitely a lot of value, like let's say a market research, but a very serious one. And I like the part that you say that it's strategic thinking, not just that okay, they are selling this right here, the price of this product is that, the government in certain part. No, it's more like let's make this a informational product so you can get value out of it, right?
Exactly, exactly, because it's very different to have access to lots of data that than what to do with that data, what decisions to take with that data, and what are the best investment strategies, or what are the best divestment decisions that you can make, cost cutting strategies and whatnot with the data. So the combination of that strategic thinking with lots of data is where the most value is added in the kinds of projects that we try to participate in.
Okay, and I can imagine this is globally, or is it mostly for the North America region? What's the main clients that you're working with?
The company is originally from Scotland, and it's globally, it has a global presence. Then something like 4 or 5 years ago, an American company bought us, and it's an American holding. So the headquarters are in the United States, in the north of the United States, and most of my own business is in the Americas region. So that's companies from Canada, United States, and Mexico, and sometimes in Latin America.
That sounds great. So essentially, yeah, most of the world, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
correct.
so Daniel, I want to get back to the beginning, and I know this is the typical format. So if you guys want to skip all the way to the actual industry, you can do it. But for me, it's always very important to try to start from the beginning because you are in a very, let's say, privileged, not privileged, but a position that a lot of chemical engineers, maybe young engineers or maybe even senior engineers, will want to be. So did you ever thought that by studying chemical engineering you will end up in something similar that you're doing right now, or was it a, let's say, spontaneous or unexpected?
Yeah, I think it was more the latter. It was probably more spontaneous slash what was available in terms of opportunities rather than a planned path from the beginning. At the beginning, the reason that I decided to study chemical engineering was because of my father's family business. I thought chemical engineering was one of the more suited careers to come back and help him with his business. He has a small brewery of both high quality liquors and some uh, bubbly beverages, let's call it that, because they are not necessarily sodas but more artisanal kind of things. So thinking about this beverage industry in a small scale, in an artisanal scale, I thought that a chemical engineering degree would be best suited to scale it up and work with. However, that was one of the first motivators. And then after I joined, I realized it was one of the greatest decisions because of the content and the people I got to meet. So during the evolution of our career and being exposed to what are alternative paths, and then being exposed to what opportunities were presented to us, particularly at the end of our career, on the recruiting events, and how some specific companies came to find people to employ. I realized that one of the great career paths was consulting. And also I realized I got to know a little bit more about myself, understand what were my some of my strengths and abilities, and most of that was aligned with the consulting business. And lastly, I had a more senior cousin of mine which worked in Boston Consulting Group, which is one of the three top general consulting management firms, and he shared his experience with me. And after I got to understand all of the consulting career path and the intellectual challenge that it represented, that's when I realized that then it could be a very suitable path for me.
Okay,
But
so you just love the idea of going into business and industry overall.
mhm, yeah, what I do love most is the intellectual challenge and the continuous learning requirement. That's probably one of the reasons I continue working here.
Okay, and going back once again, when did you like realized? I imagine yourself going to tech at the initial first semester, maybe 2 3 semesters. When did you realize that, I was going to maybe go back and help my father in the company, but maybe there are so many areas that I can focus, so maybe it's not necessarily for me that I need to go back, so I can open my own way? When was it?
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's, I think it's hard to pinpoint an inflection point. I would say that it was some more of a couple of stages of my experience. At first, the first exposure that I had on project evaluation sort of subject on project engineering, which we started learning what MPV was and financially evaluate a project, was one of the first sparks of interest of the kind of work that consulting does. And then on the abroad experience I had in France, I left for France in 6 months, and then they over there I had some actual business more business focused syllabus. So that those two were a little bit of more look at what the other side of the processing plants and the part, that very technical part that we learn very deeply in our career. Look at the other side of all of this. They're both very important. You need to understand both of them to be able to explode all of these opportunities. And so I think by having a little more exposure on the business side of our career was probably a couple of the stages that pushed me into the direction. And then, as I was saying before, after learning what would be potential career paths, both with more senior people that work there and with the recruiting events, I think in these sort of stages, I realized that probably more aligned for my strengths was a different career path than coming back home and helping here.
Okay, that's great. And what did your father thought? Did he always allow you to do your own path, or did he wanted you to go back and help him?
Oh, he was very supportive. He would have loved that I came back, but once he realized how happy I was and how potential growth I could have, he never even brought the subject back once, and not even today he has even brought the subject. And the other thing that helped was that one of my brothers came back. He used to work in consulting as well, but he couldn't handle the work life balance, so he came back, and there was he was filling up a big space here, so I think that helped.
Okay, definitely. Then, and I have this question, which is also a personal one, not just for this show. But did you ever saw yourself being a process engineer or an engineer that's actually working in the machines and in the process, or did you always saw yourself, let's say, on the administration part or more into the, let's say, office thing of the process?
Yeah, I think at the beginning I had a little bit of an illusion of working as a very technical process engineer, designing process and designing plants and doing the core chemical engineering work, because I really loved those subjects and I was really good at them. But then I realized that there is a lot more value in different parts of the value chain of the plants, and that so specific technical work is typically very limited in terms of impact and value creation. So I think my ideal path would be to have that very temporary, just enough to understand what are the intricacies of those processes and those designs and the plant, and to be very well versed in the engineering part, but to have the responsibility of a much higher level, to have a more strategic responsibility on the decision of where to put the money in, how much money, what is the size, what is going to be the strategy going forward for what venture you want to get involved with. So that's why I thought that even though I think it's a very quote unquote romantic way of developing your profession, I think for a much higher both economical retribution and impact, it's probably you have to put your sights to a much higher point of view, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Actually, to be honest, I didn't imagine myself not going into the actual machines. So I
Mm.
said, I studied 5 years this stuff to end up not doing it. So I was like, no, I gotta go there. And that's why I really searched for a process engineering part. But I also imagined myself like you did, that you wanted to go and grow into a higher value position, not always
Exactly.
stay, which doesn't mean that there's no value in process engineering, but that you the thing you stated, that you are, let's say, the head or mind of the let's say plant, and you
Yeah.
know what to do, how much to produce, what to sell, which clients to go, all that. And the process engineer is simply just adjusting the process, which in my opinion is also great. But if you want to go further in the value chain that you stated, it's also a very good idea to directly go there. Or
Co-
do you think it was a great idea to go directly for business consulting, or do you maybe have this doubt whether or not you should have gone into process engineering first, know the process stuff, and then go into business consulting?
Yeah. At the beginning, I had my doubts that, as you said, I think there is a lot of value in going inside the intricacies of the process, in going inside the machine, going really close to the machines and understand those technical issues. So at the beginning, I thought I was missing out on having that experience. However, after a few projects that forced me into learning really fast some of the processes, I realized that it can be learned just deep enough to have a high level decision, and just to not be able to for someone to deceive you. Let me put it that way. So just you understand it just well enough that when you have to negotiate with someone, or when you have to take a decision, you don't mess up. And after I realized that, I sort of kind of dominated those doubts, and they dissipated. And then I was glad that I started on the consulting journey from the beginning, because I realized that it's not a one-way street. Let me put it that way. So anytime I would require to understand the intricacies of the process, I could do it. And I it probably was going to be hard because you had to do it fast, but I could do it. On the other way, if you start on the process engineering, going back to consulting, that's a harder transition. You need to either start from the beginning, or practically go on an MBA and then apply, and the application process, the recruitment process are insane. They have a very low acceptance rate. So going through those hurdles later in your career is much harder. So the quote unquote two-way street is easier if you're on the consulting side rather than on the process engineering side.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you in that you need to know the least amount of information in order to avoid being deceived. It's like going to the
Exactly.
car mechanic and you don't know what's happening. Let's say you just bring the car and say, "Okay, please fix it," and they can deceive you and tell you, "No, it's this pump and this gear and this, let's say, part of the motor, which is very hard to get, and I'm going to charge you XXY amount." Or if you know, okay, maybe I know it's the transmission, I will let them know it's about the transmission. I know it's only this gear, the one that's failing. And then you go and show them that you actually know about the, let's not the process, the car. They will not deceive you, or at least not deceive you that much.
Exactly, no, completely. And in my case, since it's what you're trying to solve are high level problems for a large oil and gas company, you need to go and interview lots of actual process engineers and try to understand from their point of view what are the real problems that are going on. So you need to be able to understand their language. You need to be able to understand some of the very technical answers that they'll give you, and interpret them and synthesize them and create whatever recommendations that you'll get from that whole analysis, and understanding the intricacies of the process at a certain level, just to be able to interpret their issues and their answers. That is very valuable, but that's not a completely deep enough analysis that you would require to perform the position to be able to interpret that information. You
Okay.
do it with less than actually performing the position.
And I have this doubt. Would you say that you have an advantage compared to maybe another, let's say, someone that studies finance or business itself and have, let's say, not exactly the same job position, but similar positions? Would you say that you have an advantage in that sense? Or would you say that it's overall about the people, or let's say about the person, if he's capable or not of getting along with, let's say, in this case, with a process engineer that is working in a refinery?
I would say that yes, there is an advantage at junior positions, at an analyst position, at a business consultant position. There is an advantage. The advantage is very light. I think the other factor that you mentioned, the capability of learning and the way you interact with people, that is more important. But still, if you have quote unquote ceteris paribus, if you have the same amount of capability and interactions and you have a chemical degree because you understand, you have a better capacity on understanding these complex processes versus someone that studied economics or finance that doesn't, having the rest of the variables constant, this will give you an edge in the sense that you will require less time to cross that learning curve, which is one of those terms that is used widely. Learning
Yeah.
curves in our careers, every project requires a learning curve. So the faster you go through that learning curve, the more efficient you'll be able to deliver, and especially at junior levels where you have to prove yourself both with the manager and the rest of the company and comparatively to other analysts, that small edge can represent a difference in terms of performance or in terms of time that is required for you to deliver certain analysis and whatnot. And at those levels in this industry, it's very competitive, and the way not only at those levels, at every level it's very competitive, but the way that the evaluations are performed are not absolute, are very relative amongst analysts. So when there is a bunch of very competitive people, very smart people, or overachievers driven and whatnot, that edge can represent a difference for you to stand out on that sort of environment, which I think is great.
Yeah, definitely. I have this image of business consultants, or let's say overall consulting engineers, that they gotta be proactive, and not only if you don't know it, no one's going to expect you to say, I don't know, sorry. No, it's they expect you to go and find the solution because you are the one that it's consulting, you are the one that it's solving the problem itself. So talking about this, Daniel, how would you describe a business consultant in the, let's say, entry level point, maybe half point, and then senior level, manager level? So how do you think they should be, how, or what background they should have?
So the business consultant, in my experience in our firm originally in Schlumberger Business Consulting, it was it we used to go recruit at every single career. Everyone that would be interested was a candidate. However, for some reason, most or all of the people that we ended up extending an offer to were half of them chemical engineers, the other half were economists. And maybe that's because the profile of the people that you want matches the people that tend to choose those careers. I'm not sure the reason for that, but that was a very interesting outcome in my opinion. And apparently that outcome reflected on other firms as well, not only on ours that was focused on the energy industry, but also on other generalist firms. So, so I think there is somewhat there that describes the who a business consultant in an entry level. So I would say that a business consultant on an entry level is someone that loves the intellectual challenge, someone that maybe love is a strong word, but at least enjoys having these intellectual challenges, enjoys having to solve problems that don't have a straight answer, and has the ability to learn new things quite quickly. So these are all very generic characteristics that I'm describing, but I think those things fit well with the chemical engineering profile. Having the ability to structure a complex problem is some of the things that you learn best by those complex subjects, such as mass transfers and momentum transfer and heat transfer. All of those things just give you very complex problems that you need to understand in your mind, structure them, and be able to go uh, step by step to solve them. So going back to your question, who is a junior level business consultant is one, someone that likes to have intellectual challenges, someone that is capable of structuring complex problems, and someone that is willing to execute on the steps to solve these complex problems. And by that, there are a bunch of other soft characteristics that require, such as drive, discipline, some kind of mental order, and of course, being very good at numbers is always great, because everything is about numbers. In our firm, is that okay? You have that decision. You need to put a value in that decision. You need to put a number in that decision. That's half of the work we do. How much does this decision cost? How much is it worth? So the
Okay.
numbers part is very important. And then
Daniel, sorry, just quick question. Would you say gut feeling is out of the way, or would you say it's also valuable?
I think gut feeling is very valuable at more senior levels. At,
Okay.
at, at more junior levels, those strong analytics, strong structuring, great communication skills, great both being able to clearly explain an idea, both written and talk. Those are the things that are probably most valuable, and some of these are mostly trained during the first couple of years, and so having the innate ability to learn all of this is probably what best fits the profile. But on later, more senior positions and more responsibilities, you start to get more of that soft part, that gut feeling, and more of a people interaction and team building, and all of those soft abilities become more and more important. So the gut feeling part, I think that is very closely related to your experience. So as you go on having experience in different projects in different industries and learning lots of lessons, there is a subconscious part in your brain that knows what's going on and can tie the analogies between one problem in one industry and the other problem in the industry. And I think the reflection of that subconscious learning is the gut feeling telling you one way or the other. So I think that's why it's more typically reflected at more senior positions.
Say educated gut feeling guess, would you say?
Yeah, completely. And I in my own experience, I think I'm not senior enough to be strongly guided by my gut feeling, but I see it very often on partners and directors that they they very quickly know what the answer is going to be, and then we just invest a lot of time in proving that answer. But that gut feeling that tells them what the correct hypothesis to very complex questions is, I think that's just a product of lots of years of experience.
Okay. And before we go to the senior level, let's say, profile, I want to ask you this. Would you say intelligence is something required, or would you say that you can fake it till you make it, or maybe it's more about people skills? What's the thing with, because I have this idea that a lot of intelligent people go into business consulting.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's very hard to say what what level is actually raw intelligence and what level is sort of lots of practice, because the recruitment process is a very standard way of screening people, and this standardization can be perfected through practice. So we have this math exam at the beginning, and then you get from 3 to 6 case interviews, and then there is a soft part which you evaluate in terms of how much rapport the interviewer builds with the interviewee, and that is very hard to practice, I would say. So that's around 20% of the process. The 80% of the process, the typical 80/20, is on the more practicable skills. So if you are maybe not an intelligence in the classical sort of IQ kind of way, because there are different types of intelligence as well. But if you are not on the say top 15 or top 20 percentile of IQ, but you practice a lot of GMAT and you practice a lot of case interviews and you have good rapport, you can definitely make it. And of course there's probably going to be a much higher probability that you do that if you are on the top percentile of IQ of quote unquote classical cognitive intelligence. So I think it's my long answer to your short question would be it's a factor that is nice to have, but not necessary. Not necessary. However, to complement, if that's not the case, in your case, you would probably require a much higher amount of practicing on the standardized version of the recruitment process.
And will you say maybe selling skills? Let's say someone that is very, I don't know, practice in that way that can sell, maybe a insurance seller or telemarketer that sells a lot. Will you say they have a good shot, or let's say they are not in the top of the intelligence level, but maybe they are very good at selling, only selling. Let's say not
Hmm.
solving problems, just selling. Will you say they have a good position in the industry?
But they wouldn't. Would they have strong analytics, or would they have a strong way to structure a problem, or are they just really, really good at selling and not good at all at the other parts? Is that the
let's
case?
say let's say they are not the best, but the strong part is they are very good at selling.
That would be very hard. It would be very hard because depending on which level you want to entry into consulting, at the classical entry points, which are analyst, say, graduating from undergrad, or graduating from postgrad, from a master's degree. Those are the two classical entry levels. At those two entry levels, there's a much higher weight of the decision on the analytical skills than on the soft or slash selling skills. So it would be very hard for someone that is very strong at selling, but not very strong at analytical or structuring, to go into those levels. However, there are probably positions more senior, higher up in the chain, as a director, or as a, there are different names depending on the firm for the position, but typically there is the entry level analyst, then the consultant, then the manager, and then after the manager there is the director or the principal, just before partner. And at that level, the responsibilities are more focused on selling. You need to sell projects, you need to be able to create relationships with the clients, you need to get inside the client's agenda, and typically people at those positions are required to have a much higher degree of abilities in the softer side of more people skills and selling skills. However, to be able to get there, you it's a given that you have the core consulting skills. It's a given because you most likely have gone through the prior steps, and most likely you have that core consulting skills, because that selling becomes a very important part of your responsibility. But you still have to be able to execute. You still have to be able to guide your team, and you still have to be able to challenge your team, and just you have to be able to screw the tools just strong enough within your team, so that the quality of your work remains at the most rigorous level, and that will always fall back into those core consulting skills. So that's why I would say that it would be very unlikely that someone without those gets in, even at those senior level positions, that selling is a more valuable skill.
Okay, and Daniel, I know that you were I don't know if you were, but I know that you did some, let's say, recruiting, right? And when you are looking for candidates, do you are looking for someone that, of course, has, as you stated, the analytical skills, but are you also expecting that they have this potential to become the so-called sellers or directors? Or would you say that in some cases you already know that this person is going to just get into the entry level point and maybe with good luck will end up his career in the, let's say, I don't know what's the following one, the consultant level.
No, completely. I would say that the ideal candidate has enough of everything to reach the top. However, it's very hard in a recruiting process to be able to evaluate at such depth levels those abilities. I mean, it's just 4 or 5 interviews of 1 hour, and so if you participate in the recruiting process from the recruitment point of view, you get to speak to the candidate twice, once in 1 hour interview, and then once in a different process that he presents a problem or a boot camp. It depends. So you get to interact with him or her twice, right? So it's very a small window to be able to judge such a deep character evaluations. You need to be able to see that at least he'll be able to very greatly perform the first couple of levels, and I think that the soft parts to evaluate, you just have to go with your gut. Going back to your previous gut feeling discussion that you raised before, I think for that it's very hard to say, and what in the reality, there is a very small amount of people that come into consulting that actually gets to go up until those levels. Those levels are, it's like, so from the recruitment side, it's like maybe less than 1% from the people that apply get hired, and from the people that get hired, even a lower amount of people reach partner level, because it's just not only a matter of having the correct profile, having the abilities. It's also dependable of the economic environment. How well did you choose your the client that you will invest time with? How disciplined you are in maintaining drive across years of very cyclical work-life balances, where there is so intense periods and then not so intense periods, but it's just so many variables that very small amount of people reach those levels. So I would say that it's almost impossible to know. However, I think the idea is to try to choose people that have the potential, but I say that it's very inaccurate, because it's almost impossible to realize with such a small level of interaction.
Okay, okay. And talking about this, then I can imagine being under pressure. Do you see your fellow colleagues as competition, or how would you describe? And I love it because you have been in several firms, so it's not only that you've been only in one. But how would you describe overall this industry, and how do colleagues and bosses and superiors see themselves? Is it a very raw ambient in which everyone sees themselves as a competition, or will you say it's very healthy environment or something in between?
I think there that specific characteristic, it's very different among firms, and not only among firms but within the same firm, it's different among offices. So in my personal experience, at the first office I was in, the people I was competing, quote unquote, competing with, were very close friends of mine. I mean, you know them. They we studied together at chemical engineering, and most of people were from the same school, and we were very close friends. And the dynamics of the office just was great in terms of team cohesion. So I never felt like I was competing, or I never had any negative bias towards any of my colleagues in terms of what of a sum zero game. Whatever they lost, I would gain, or whatever I lose, they would gain. Never, not at all. It was a positive sum game in which when they perform well, I could learn from what great did they do, and that would benefit myself. So it was good for me that they were great performance, and in reverse as well. When I was doing really good and I was thriving on a specific project, I'd be able to share that with them, and they'd be able to replicate it. And business was going well as well. That's another probably another variable that affects the dynamics and the culture of the office. If the business is working, if projects are selling, and if we all have work, and there is enough size, there is enough growth available to be shared amongst most employees. So that also allows that game to not be zero sum. So those variables, and there are probably other there's probably some part of personal chemistry amongst colleagues and whatnot, that also allowed, and the way the leadership led the office, and other probably variables that I'm missing. But during those first 4 years, on my experience, it was very positive sum game, competitive but very healthy competitive, and that that helped a lot in a very accelerated career path. In the other firms, or for other friends of mine that worked at different firms, I saw that it was very much going like the zero sum game kind of dynamics, as to the ranking would be dependent of the performance of each person, and if one person performed better, then by definition you would require to be ranked lower and be required to be compensated lower, and etc., etc. So that I think that exists a lot. That is more likely, I think that's the case in which the competition is not as healthy, and the personal relationships are not always as close. It's a very hard balance to find, I think, and I would say I was very fortunate at the beginning. At my second stage, I at my second firm, I entry at a more senior level, so my dynamics were very, very different, and my role was very, very different from the first one. So I didn't have enough, um, I didn't have a significant time frame to extract a conclusive idea, or to have a straight answer for that. But I think that the very fact that I was at a more senior level, and the culture was completely different, changed the whole dynamic, definitely. However, I think more often than not, the dynamic is not the most sorry, the dynamic is not the most healthy. So yeah,
Okay. Yeah, like a Shark Tank, right?
exactly, completely.
Like a piranha tank.
Yeah, but it's
Okay.
fun, man. You need some adrenaline. You need some
Yeah.
stress to grow.
Yeah, I want to talk about the stress, but right now let's stick to your, let's say, CV or curriculum. And one question I have for you is, I know that you went directly to this growth and profit consulting firma. That's the name of the firma. And I want to ask you, why didn't you go to a, let's say, top company, as you were saying, like Bain or BCG or all those Mackenzie, all those companies that are, let's say, the standard way to start a business consulting life?
So that was because it was a matter of what opportunities were available at the time. It's probably the major reason as to why I took it. But the other reason was that since I wanted to quote unquote tip tip my toe on the water, I wanted to do it in a place where I could, if anything was the worst, I didn't lose much. I wanted to have the opportunity later on to apply, because on the top GMCs you get to apply, and then if they reject you, then I think not sure, but you might not get to apply instantly after at the same sort of consecutively. So I wanted to quote unquote save my bullet. So I wanted
Okay.
to top a T on the water while saving a bullet for the big role, if that worked. But the other reason was because the opportunity of working in Monterrey with the people I work with, that was one of the, while studying, yeah, that that was a lot of value in my view.
Okay. Can you share a little bit on that, or would you just like to leave that as a overall experience?
What do you mean in my first
Yeah,
year?
yeah. What did you do in that
No,
company?
yeah,
What
definitely. It was a lot of fun. It was a small firm. We were like 15 people in Monterrey, and the overall objective of the firm was to help family businesses, medium, mid to large family businesses, institutionalize and to have a more standardized protocol of planning, strategic planning, and cost reduction initiatives, and all of the organizational issues, and all of the general consulting things that you can apply to in general the theoretical consulting business, but apply to family business in Monterrey. So that was very interesting, because the other motivation that I had was, if I understand how to do this really well, I can ultimately apply it in a family business of my own, or in my father's. So that was an ulterior motivation, which was really good. But then I realized that working with this family business is there's two things. One is it's really hard to sell projects at competitive rates, because if you're working your ass off with these very high strategic, high value tasks, you want to charge what you're worth, or what the value of the projects could be. But if that decision is applied to a business that is I don't know, that is selling a certain amount of $1 million, in which if you charge $100,000 for a project that you're going to cost the business a significant part of their costs, then it becomes very hard to escalate your work, because when you are doing this analysis, it doesn't matter if you're doing it for a $1 million plant or $100 million plant or a couple of $1 billion plants. The analysis is around the same, and it takes you around the same amount of time. Maybe the data is a little larger on larger plants, but you just need to drag the formulas on the Excel a little higher, a little go farther to the right or further down. So the amount of time invested versus the impact or the retribution or the economical compensation is not as asymmetrical as it is in now, in hindsight, as it is in the energy industry. So that was one of the setbacks that really quickly I learned, that applying these kinds of abilities and analysis is much more valuable at much higher levels and at much higher scales of projects. So that was one of the great lessons from that first year and first experience.
And do you still keep in touch with your, let's say, previous bosses or superiors?
Yeah, definitely. I had three people, three partners were the funding partners of that firm. Now they have separated. They have their own firms. I think there are two firms now, but the three of them, they are good friends of mine, and I have so much respect for them. And I think they three are very successful, and poof, they are great people. You always remember your first boss. One of the three of them, we got along personally really well, and when I graduated, he told me my first boss gave me this gift, and he gave me like this very beautiful expensive pen from Mont Blanc. So
Mm.
he gave the same gift to me. He's like, my first boss gave me this gift, and now that I'm your first boss, I want you to have it, and just to remember this experience. Those were great, and are still great relationships.
Well, that's a great way to remember a boss.
Yeah, definitely.
And well, let's continue. So you stay there in GPC. What, 1 year was it?
Yeah,
1 year.
yeah, 1 year.
And what was the thing that made you change to Schlumberger Business Consulting?
So the whole opportunity came similar to the GPC one. The availability of opportunities that were at the time led me to the recruitment process of Schlumberger. And after learning the lessons, both lessons that were important to me, one was that consulting was a type of work that was really adapted to or really fitted my profile, and the other one was much higher level projects, or much larger scale opportunities for these kind of projects, was a much more efficient way to extract value out of it. Those two lessons led me to be very excited about the SBC opportunity. And so when they came to the school to recruit, I prepared myself. I did all of these cases, and I applied, and then the whole process, and me and a couple of other friends from our career, we did the process together. And yeah, it was a tough process, but was completely worth it. So that's why I ended up accepting the offer instead of continuing to work in the GPC first firm that I got.
And comparing the, let's say, life work balance of the first consulting firma and SBC, was there a huge change, or
Yeah.
would you say the both of them were very disbalanced?
No, the GPC one was very tranquil and very well balanced. The the three partners were very aware that you want to have a very holistic employee value proposition. And on the second one, it was very dependent on the project and the manager, as it was typically in a top GMC. GMC is General Management Consulting. So in a top GMC, each manager has its own style. Each project has its own demanding requirements, and it depends on the length of the project, on how the client works, and how well you are at going through these learning curves that we were discussing at the beginning. And so the end result was that the first couple of years, poof, the first year was really tough. I After 10 months, I wasn't sure if that's really what I wanted. I was about to quit maybe once or twice because I wasn't completely convinced that the whole sacrifice of work-life balance was worth it. But I think that my judgment was a bit biased because I had a very bad luck in my first project in terms of work-life balance. But after I had a couple of other projects and I had a little more a larger
Exposure.
sample, yeah, a larger sample size, I realized that it was much more aligned to what I really wanted, and it was a great decision to stay. So I ended up not I ended up not regretting the decision of taking it, which I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because you also moved from city, right? From Monterrey to Mexico City.
yeah,
Would you say that change affected something, or
definitely. No, it does. It always change of scenery, change of life. When you're exposed to a different city in Mexico City, it's really hard to drive. So I would walk to the office every day, which was a really good thing. But going from one place to another with the amount of traffic, it became really hard. So you need to plan your evenings well, and well, you don't know as much as you knew on your previous city. So that always influences your lifestyle indeed. So yeah, I guess that also influences. But after when you move to a new city, I would say after 6 or 10 or maybe 1 year, 6 months or 10 months or 1 year, everything you adapt, and it's amazing the capability of adaptation that people have. I mean, we can adapt to anything, any quality of life. So after you adapt, then it's great.
yeah, that's and I have this doubt. Would you consider Mexico City the main hub for business consulting?
Yeah, absolutely. It's in Mexico, it's a very centralized economy. It's by far the largest economical hub and by far the largest concentration of large headquarters of companies, both Mexican and international companies. The second is Monterrey, but it's a far second, and it has headquarters of large companies from Monterrey, but most international companies have their headquarters in Mexico City. So interacting with people that have positions on the large corporatives and headquarter offices is where most consulting business is led. So being able to interact, which now is ironically is not that important as interactions are mostly done
Yeah.
remotely, but historically interactions have to be with the highest level people, and those people are typically located at the headquarters. So most economical activity and decisions are led from the headquarters, and particularly in the energy industry, the two large both oil company and electric company have their corporatives in Mexico City, so Pemex and CFE, and all of the subsequent economical development that peripheries these two companies and these two industries is there. All of the headquarters are there, with a couple of exceptions, but most of it is there. And those exceptions that have headquarters elsewhere would have a very relevant office in Mexico City that is just important enough to conduct business with. So it's by far the best place to work in Mexico.
So would you recommend, or maybe not even recommend, but say that it's almost a must that young business consultants will end up in, well, let's say in the case of Mexico, in Mexico City, but overall in a global city or hub for government? I would say Mexico City is essentially the thing is government and energetic center, and as well as business, of course. Would you say it's a requirement?
I think in it depends a lot in the country and it depends a lot in the industry, because at least in Mexico, it's an easy yes. An answer is easy in Mexico, but in different countries, in the U.S., you have a technology hub in Silicon Valley, in California, and a financial hub in New York, and an energy hub in Houston, and et cetera, et cetera. So there are different hubs of different industries in different cities. So it depends on what you want to specialize. There's a higher amount of probability to go into the specific place that you want to go into that industry. But in terms of consulting in general, with a open repertoire of industries, I would say that a big city is a must. That I would say so. A big city is a must. Nowadays, If you can work remotely at senior level positions, you can do it from anywhere. But an entry level position, when you need to prove yourself to the office, when you need to learn those skills, when you need to interact a lot, it's even in remote working era like this one, it's probably going to be a requirement that you develop physically within a big city.
Okay, yeah, I would say business consulting is always going to these nice cities
Yeah,
because it's always about also the status, because the headquarters typically not only about business consulting but overall headquarters will be in great cities, which the life there is a very metropolitan style or lifestyle.
yeah.
So yeah, I will agree with you that eventually you will need to move to a large city. But I just was wondering if it was possible, maybe, or I would say maybe into smaller firms that will be the case, but for large companies, not likely, right?
I think so. I think depends also on the culture of the company. There's probably companies that will be more open, especially going forward in remote working at any level, at even entry levels. And for those companies, for those cultures, which are probably the smaller companies and more agile and innovative and more like startups and stuff like that, that in that sense, it's probably irrelevant where you are physically. But in the more classical companies, in the top GMCs, currently established large consulting firms, I think it's going to be really hard for remote working to work at any level, especially at entry level. So I think it's still time for that to happen. So I think it's going to be a requirement.
Mm, okay. And Daniel, I have here your, let's say, your job titles: business analyst, then senior analyst, and associate consultant. So I want to ask you about the main works that you were doing in such job titles. Did they change? What were the responsibility differences? And were you able to manage a group of people, or was it always you serving a boss?
So those first three levels are pretty much the same. The only difference between the levels are the level of responsibility that you have within a project. You report to a project manager. You develop in the first level. You develop a specific part of a work stream, and in the second, in the senior analyst or the consultant, you are whole responsible of an entire work stream or a part of the project, and you develop independently from the manager, and the manager just checks on you less frequently than at the beginning, and you have much more independence to develop the project towards whatever you feel the conclusion should lead, and to create your own conclusions on your own work stream. But the role within a project is very similar. You work below a project manager. You work to have answers to specific questions within the project, and you report to the manager. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. And then the section SBC was bought or acquired by Accenture. Can you let us know what was all about this transition, which I find it pretty interesting because it's not that common, but it's, I would say, very interesting how being acquired by another company changes culture if that's the case.
No, yeah, that was an interesting as well from my point of view. It What happened was that the large company Schlumberger wanted to focus on their core business. The Schlumberger is a large oil services company, so what they do is they sell services, drilling services, or seismic or wire log services, or general actual physical services to oil producing companies, so to Pemex or to Shell, Exxon. So that is the core business, and the consulting arm of that huge company was a very small part of the business that was not part of its core. So they decided to divest it and sell it. And so the buyer, in this case Accenture, agreed to buy uh, employment of a bunch of people. We were like 200 people, and paid an amount of money to Schlumberger just to for Schlumberger to fire those people, and for Accenture to hire us, which was very funny because um, there was no real difference in what we were doing, but there was a difference in terms of who we were. So there was a brand difference. There was a difference in terms of what we would have a little bit more liberty in working with, for example, competitors with Schlumberger that we wouldn't before. We couldn't do a project for a direct competitor of Schlumberger because we were Schlumberger, so there was a big conflict of interest. So there was a little bit of an advantage there. There was also a difference in terms of what we could speak to the press or not, because Schlumberger being very involved with the oil producing companies is very sensitive on what they can say or what they cannot say about the performance of these oil producing companies. Now that we were Accenture, we were a lot more free to have an opinion on the performance of specific companies that were not directly related to our holding. So those two were somewhat of a change, which in my own experience, since I was working at such a low level, it didn't have a big impact in my work. The difference in my work was that my payslip had a different name, but that's about it. We were in the same office and we were working with the same people, with the same clients, doing the same projects. And so
Okay.
the other part that was interesting though was the administrative part, because well, we got essentially we got fired and then we got rehired, which was great administratively, because you get a liquidation bonus. Because when you get fired in Mexico, Mexican laws protect the employee. So when you get fired, you get like this big bonus because you got fired. So out of the blue, everybody just got a big bonus because they got fired. So that was great. And
Okay.
yeah, it was a really good year because of that.
And vacations were respected, or did you start from zero?
No, everything was respected.
Okay.
Vacations and how do you say that? Antiquity.
Time working. I don't know,
Yeah,
but I get it.
seniority, maybe seniority, that's the way, I'm not sure. So that everything was respected. They were really really beneficial in every sense to us, and on top of that they gave us the firing bonus, which was great.
Okay, actually, that's great because I would say maybe not that worth it if you're starting from zero, but if you're like all the human resources stuff is there plus the
Yeah,
money, why not accept that?
no, exactly. And there were people that had 15 20 years of seniority, and for those people the liquidation bonus is proportional to the seniority, so the amount of time. So you get like 20 days of pay per year of seniority, per year of time. So being able to monetize those years, because that's um, by definition that's an asset that you have, the antiquity you have on a company, but
Yeah.
not necessarily you will execute it, because some of those assets only get executed when you get fired, but not when you quit. When you quit, you don't get those. So if you quit, then you just lose them. So
Mhm.
it's not a real asset. But most of those people that had so many years just got it. They got an i- immediate monetization of the asset, which was those were fortunate. In my case, was not large enough, but still was much better than nothing.
And what now the question will be why did you change if you were or maybe because you had a lot of cash and you wanted to experience something else? What made you change to Ernest and Young?
The opportunity. So once we changed to Accenture, at the beginning nothing changed, but then slowly some things were changing. There was a difference in terms of the career path evolution and the philosophy of the leadership at Accenture that differ from the philosophy of the leadership at SBC. So those differences started making some people to change um, their priorities and to leave the firm. So there were other firms snatching people, and one of the partners that left from the Houston office left for EY, and so he wanted to create an energy practice in Mexico City, and so he needed energy experienced, quote unquote experience, because 3 or 4 years in my experience, I don't think it's enough to to call myself an experienced hiree. But he wanted to create an energy practice, so he reached to his network, and I was in his network. We had a really good relationship, so he told me, come on, we're gonna build up the energy practice in EY here in Mexico City. Go through the recruitment process here, and we'll make you an offer. And then when I went there, I went through the recruitment process. They really liked me. I had the first step in because one of the partners there, we really knew each other, so they knew how well I worked. And
He
then
was he was vouching for you very seriously.
exactly, very seriously and very with efforts. So I was in a very good position to have a leveraged negotiation, which I did. I negotiated both my economical compensation and my level of entry really aggressively. I was really happy. I was really happy at Accenture, at SBC, especially because of the people. The culture was great. So for me to leave, it had to be really worth it, which it was. So the opportunity was just too good to turn down, and so that's why I decided to leave.
Yeah, I remember still when you were talking to me about that in your apartment, and you were telling me that the best way to negotiate something for yourself is when you don't have the necessity to change. So as you stated, you were happy, you were doing great at your current point, so you had the advantage or this leverage to go for more. So can you let us know more if you want on how did you negotiated that? Because I think we always talk about negotiation on how to get better a raise or better positions, more responsibilities. But how would you recommend someone to get more out of a situation like this?
So in my experience, there are a few points of negotiation on your career, and one of the most important of those points are when you're changing employers. So when you're within one firm and you're trying to grow and be promoted and whatnot, you have some leverage, but not as much as you have when someone wants to hire you, when they have decided to hire you. So that is one of the first things to consider. If you want to have leverage, one of the points that you'll have most leverage is right at that moment before you go in. After you've accepted and you've gone in and you've got your salary and your whole package and whatnot, then at that point, that is very, very hard to negotiate because you have much less leverage. So having said that, when you are at the part where you need to start putting arguments down, there are a couple of things that helped me. One was to find as much information about the market, both the market and the position in terms of compensation. So, how much is this level of responsibility, is this position worth in the market, both in Mexico City and globally? Because the way I would sell myself is I am capable enough to perform at this level globally. So I can work with teams globally. So then the position should be evaluated and should be valued at a global scale because labor markets are very different from geography to geography. So having a benchmark, both in terms of the amount of information and the market value of that position, both in your place and in some other places, will give you a great point of reference. Then on, I think you need to be able to reach the point that they will say no. So the way that that happened to me was that I gave them a number that I was willing to make the decision with, a large number. And then after they came back with that number, I told them, okay, that's great. I want a larger bonus. And then I told them I want larger amount of vacation, larger. And then there was a point at the bonus point. There was a point where they told me, okay, this is it, no more. That's as much as we can do. So I wasn't afraid to receive a no. I realized, I think it was probably because of the first point that you mentioned, that I was happy enough that if the negotiations turned south, everything was all right. But that that non fear and that aggressive push was one of the greatest, probably one of the greatest advantages on the negotiation table. And once I got that, no, until here, this is as much as we can give. Okay, I reached that point, and then I decided, yes, I'll take it. But I reached that point more often than not. I think people leave money at the table because they are afraid of reaching that point, of reaching the point that you demand more, and you throw such a large number that you receive a no. You shouldn't be afraid of receiving a no. I mean, if you have enough benchmark information, if you have references, and if you can state how much value you'll be adding to the firm, what your responsibilities are going to be, there's no reason why throwing your number pair with these arguments, there's no reason why a no to that should be a problem. Okay, a no to that. Okay, then I'll go with the original proposal without that large bonus or whatnot. So that
Yeah,
was, yeah.
I don't think why we think that maybe if you throw a very large number, they will say no. You gotta go. We don't like you. See you.
Yeah, that makes no sense. I mean, we are negotiating here. Why would they? I mean, they also have invested time. They also want you. So I just couldn't think of the scenario that if I say something that they say no, I couldn't think of the scenario that that would mean everything just falls apart. Why? Why would I mean we're negotiating? Okay, you say no. Okay, no. And in my experience, it never happens. You're negotiating and you say, okay, this is what I demand, and they say, okay, this is what's reasonable. If you say something that they feel that's not reasonable, it doesn't mean that the whole thing has to go south. That makes no sense to me. That means they lost a bunch of time they invested on recruiting you, and they need
But
to start from zero. And poof, it's just so expensive as well.
maybe they have a pool of candidates. That might be the case, but I don't think it's that at the level that you are. Maybe at entry level, that will be the case that you have a pool of candidates, and if you have a very, let's say, you have one guy at, let's say, 10 points, and you have this other guy at 9 points. You offer the guy at 10 points, and then he goes, "I need more cash. I want more this and this." Then you say, "Well, maybe I'll go for the one with 9 points." But at the level that you are, I'm pretty sure that you are like one tops two candidates for that job.
Exactly, completely. Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. This strategy is probably not worth it at an entry level.
Yeah,
Definitely.
you need to know where you're standing, as you stated, that
Yeah,
you know how much you're valuable, your value in the market, and as you stated, you have no reason to go.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I think no, completely. And the other advantage that I had was that I realized how much time and effort they had spent on finding me, and that I I didn't know for sure, but I had a sense of how many people they were searching for because the industry is not that big. And so my own friends and people were contacted by them. And I realized how many were interested and how many weren't. So I realized that it's not as you said, the pool of people that would be able to do that at that stage, at that moment, where it wasn't that big. So yeah, I didn't have much to lose by being very aggressive.
that's nice. That's always something I say is always be looking for a job, even if you don't want to change,
Yeah,
because if you get an offer, you can always counter offer in the job that you are currently, either if you like it or not. That's another point. But if you have an offer, you can always say, okay, I got this offer. I don't want to go. I really like this place. But if you are willing to add an extra, it doesn't need to be exactly the same offer as I'm getting outside, but at least give me either cash or give me more responsibilities. Something that uh, makes you grow in the company and that they see that you're not there just like a pawn or I don't know, like a point in a machine, that you want to grow there. That's
mm,
very important.
yeah, no, completely. That is a great reflection of drive and ambition on a candidate, which is very often looked for and well received.
And now, Daniel, what did you did in Ernst and Young? Because I think that's not that into only oil and gas, or is it?
No, it was the well, the original meaning for me to go there was to start or work on their energy practice, given my background. But the what practically happened was when we had projects that related the energy industry, I was normally working on them. But when we didn't, since we didn't have a robust business development in the energy industry, we not always had one. So I would find myself working on any other industry half of the time. So I worked on retail industry. I did a great project on the eye lens. What's the name? Oculus. The market of sunglasses and not sure
It's
what the name in English is. But
I get it. I get it.
yeah,
Like,
so I did one great project in the Oculus, let's say that way, Oculus market, and I did other couple of projects in the motorcycle business, and then we did one crazy project with the um, religious people in Mexico City. That was a quote kind of pro bono project, but it was very wide variety of issues, and it was sometimes it was fun, sometimes it was frustrating, sometimes it was just something that I really didn't want to long term dedicate to. So that was partly one of the reasons that I wasn't as motivated to grow long term there. But it was great at the beginning because it gave me the opportunity to perform as a project manager. So going back to the positions in consulting, as I was saying before, you get the analyst and consultant position, and then after that you get a big change in responsibilities being a project manager. You're completely responsible of the project, and then you start having people reporting to you. And so in EY, when my first experiences, I had the first project I had was that in the sunglasses and lens market kind of project, and I had two very junior analysts report to me, and that was very challenging um, environment because they imagine just two people that are just out of university and don't know how to use Outlook, and it's the first time they send a work mail. So it
That's another topic to talk about, but yeah, I get it.
it was a great challenge. So that was one of the biggest differences I'd say that I had in my role there. And I think going back to the good lessons that you can take from that I could take from that experience, and that probably your listeners should take, is that at some stage in your career, managing people and those soft skills become really important, and they are probably one of the hardest ones from a chemical engineering type of profile, because they are very soft skills, and you need to motivate people, and typically these are smart people. If you're working on a high level, or maybe not high level but competitive firm, and even a plant or different environments, you probably work with smart people that you need to keep motivated. And so having these people um, perform at the adequate level, but not pushing them too much, but at the same time not giving them enough place to just do whatever they want, or having also a personal relationship with them, and that whole combination of factors was really challenging for me. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges on growing your career at any, not only consulting but any career path. If you want to be an employee, probably it's a completely different world being an entrepreneur, but going an employee, and if you want to go to the managerial path, which is probably one of the highest probability paths of growing, you require those skills, and those skills are one of the hardest challenges to develop. So that,
Uh, Would you say it's hardest for you, or let's say for me, that we don't have that much? But would you say there's people that get it easy, that they have that, I don't know, that soft skill area covered?
no, completely. You're right. It's probably a biased judgment that I'm giving. It's a the way that I experienced it. It was really hard for me because my profile is much more focused on the hard skills, analytical skills, and all of the structural things that we were discussing at the beginning. And these soft skills and people interacting skills are not my strengths. So, um, however, they are just as much or maybe even more necessary as you grow. So that's why they were harder for me. However, there's probably people that are more aligned with these skills and that will find it much easier to manage other people. And those people are just going to be great project managers, and they should exploit those strengths and become great managers as fast as they can, and then manage larger and larger projects and show those strengths, because those strengths are very highly valued on the market.
Exactly. The leadership skill is very scarce and valuable.
Yeah, highly valuable.
Okay, and Daniel, I know that you were only there for 1 year and a half. Were you maybe regretting going from Accenture to Ernst and Young because of the change of industry and that, or did you always know that you can change easily of industry or company?
You raise a good point there. No, I did not regret it. I think the opportunity was completely worth it. I did validate small doubt in my mind that I had that if I could transition from the energy industry into any other industry, which I confirmed with this experience. It not voluntarily, but I did confirm it, and so that sort of gives me a little bit of peace of mind that I'm capable to adapting at other industries. So that was good news for me. So that was another great lesson that I learned. But I guess your question comes because the amount of time was not large enough to.
Oh, no, not really about the amount of time, but you were telling me that the industries or things you were doing were not that into your actual, let's say, area of expertise, or let's say comfort zone, or not comfort zone, the industry that you have been working on for several years. So that's my question.
Yeah, no, completely. And so when I was forced to work at an industry which wasn't my priority to develop long term, I did feel somewhat of frustration, and that was less frequent than the cool stuff that I wanted to do and that I wanted to work with. But still, it was something like let's say 40% of the time. So going to my next job, which is at my current job at Wood Mackenzie, this was one of the strongest motivators, just as well as a great opportunity that showed up in my career. The other motivator was, so one is the fact that the opportunity was available, and the other one was the 40% of the time that I wasn't working on the actual content that I wanted to work long term. So that is completely agreed on the way you put it, that it's not the topic that I want to develop in long term, this percentage of the time. However, the valuable part of that is on the other side of the same coin, is that okay, I can work in that, and I'm not a useless I'm not a useless consultant even if it's a different industry. However, it's not in my priority to develop in different industries. The energy industry is just so huge, and it just has so many great challenges in the future with the climate change and the energy transition, that there's enough there to work your ass off for the next 40 or 50 years to just stay there. So
But Daniel, that's not as exciting as getting sunglasses, is
exactly.
it?
No, actually, the sunglasses project was so different in terms of glamour. I mean, I went to interview many companies of sunglasses, and many of these are very high luxury companies. So Louis Vuitton, Gucci, and all of these companies. I went to their company, to their headquarters in Mexico City, and got to meet people. And you were sitting at the most beautiful offices with sunglasses in the walls, and you would see a beautiful model walking by, and it's just insane how much glamour there is. And that was a great experience because it was completely different. For imagine that contrast with going to a freaking oil offshore platform with a bunch of big dudes just working on their orange suits in the oil fields on, and it's like such a
Yeah.
different contrast. So that was really an interesting way of amplifying my perspective.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Definitely. It's engineering sexy versus standard sexy.
Exactly.
Okay. So Daniel, and right now with Mackenzie, what do they do? What do you do? And what's your current job position?
So yeah, I was saying at the beginning, it's a research firm. Core business is research, and we sell subscriptions, and that's about 80% of the business. 20% of the business is bespoke consulting. I'm a bespoke, I mean that they are very specific analysis to answer specific questions, most typically at asset valuation, strategy level, and more performance improvement kind of questions for the clients. Most of our clients are big oil companies, big mining companies, electrical companies, and most of the challenges that we are now trying to solve are more and more related to the energy transition, which is one of the greatest challenges that I think society is going to face. By energy transition, I mean the transformation of sources of energy that's going to be required to stop climate change, to be carbon neutral. So clean energy sources is another way of putting it. So how to, because we as a society consume so much energy, and we require so much energy to function, and not only to function, but if we want to grow economically, which is somewhat questionable. I'm not sure if that's something we should pursue, but if we want to grow economically, there is going to be a increasing requirement of obtaining very efficient sources of energy from carbon neutral ways. So all of this challenge, it's impressive how all of this challenge replicates across different parts of the industry. I mean, this challenge, of course, directly impacts oil and gas companies, but not only them, but it also impacts mining companies, because if you want to electrify everything, if you want to use electric cars, you will require a lot of batteries. And if you want batteries, you will require a lot of nickel and lithium and different minerals that require a different scale on different minings. And if you want to do mining in a carbon neutral way, you'll require to use secondary materials much more efficiently than primary. And by secondary, I mean how to recycle on wasted batteries much more efficiently than getting new resources from the ground. So you need to balance those two out. And I'm going just too way into the weeds there, but the whole idea, going back on the high level, is that this big huge energy transition challenge that we're facing, it's probably going to require a very big amount of intellectual power, because it requires a paradigm shift in the way things are done. So that's, I think that's one of our most common challenges that we face, and the companies hire us to um, answer the question as to how to go through that energy transition in a profitable way, or in a less costly way, or how do I start, because there are many companies around the world that don't even see it coming. They understand that it's coming, but don't even are doing nothing yet, and they feel like they can stay the same, but it's not the reality. I mean, uh, probably regulation is going to force a lot of companies to create new processes or to make a lot of sacrifices, and the companies that have not started or are not yet are probably both going to either going to be broke because they're not
Right.
be able to
Yeah. Go
adapt,
bankrupt.
or be forced out of business out of regulatory reasons. So going back to the question of what we're doing, it's mostly working on these big problems. It's insane, but they are huge problems, and so there's a lot of work there.
But would you say that you are like foreseeing the change so your clients get time to adapt, or would you say it's already happening and you are helping them to transition as fast as possible?
Oh, it's already happening. It's definitely already happening. The pace at which change is happening is not fast enough. That's one of the problems. The other problem is that most of the companies that are on the industry are not completely in control of what happens and what doesn't happen, because there is a certain amount of demand of commodities and of energy that it's in control of downstream industry. So if you see the value chain as energy producing, upstream, midstream, downstream, in that those three terms can be applied to many different industries, both mining, oil and gas, chemicals, and et cetera, et cetera. The downstream part, the society consumes so much that they leave no choice for the upstream producing energy. They leave no choice. So there is a big part that is not on the control of the upstream part. However, the rate at which change is required on every single part of the value chain is not fast enough. And I think there's probably going to be a combination of factors that will probably force that rate to be fast enough, and that is going to be both in terms of corporate corporate world, so the both corporate Americas, corporate Europe, and the development leading nations setting the example for the rest of the world, and authoritative governments and regulatory governments. So there will be corporate America and corporate Europe making large decisions in change, which they are doing. You probably have seen lots of announcements of energy companies and non-energy companies saying we are going to go carbon neutral by
Yeah.
2030, by 2050, and they always like these round numbers that are either ending at zero or at five. And this carbon neutrality is just usually motivated both by economical sense and by PR sense, But in a more deep level, it's just a matter of humanity surviving, and it's definitely required at all industries. So going back to the question, I think the the impulse will come from corporate Americas and corporate Europe, and regulatory change in large authoritative countries such as China, Russia, and Latin America, because those countries are much more behind in terms of their corporate priorities. So one example would be our national oil company here in Mexico, or our electrical company. They are not yet thinking about renewables. They are not thinking about climate change. They're just so far behind. They will require to be strong-handed by regulatory pressure or by social pressure, and that's probably applicable in many other developing economies. So I think that's those two factors are going to drive the pace of the change.
So you are working mostly with companies abroad, or are you working with companies in Mexico?
I am the first year and a half. I worked with companies here in Mexico, both Pemex, the national oil company, and a couple of others. But now, the last year and a half, so I've been almost 3 years here at Wood Mackenzie. The first year and a half I had that, and the second year and a half I've been working with companies in the United States and Canada, mostly in mining.
Okay, that's very hardcore pollution there.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that sounds great. So, do you feel overall great for your job, that you're doing a great thing for the environment, or do you also have this little thought, say, working with companies that are very pollutant? What do you feel, or how do you cope with that guilt, if there is any?
Yeah, I think there is probably I should be more guilty. I feel no guilt whatsoever, even if I am working on a project that is not related at all to carbon emissions or energy transition. I feel zero guilt. I don't know why. I'm not sure. I probably should feel some guilt, but I feel zero. I don't know why. I really enjoy it. So, yeah, I should, but I don't.
Okay, no, it's fine. Because I just was wondering if you like have this feeling. Because as I told you, I was talking with Gerardo, and he has this, let's say, company which is producing sugar, mm, food or snacks for kids and so. And
Yeah,
I also was wondering if he felt like guilty in working in this type of industries. And he had
that
other
was his
set of.
answer. The-
I will not display the answer. You need to check
okay,
out the episode when
awesome.
I launch it.
Yeah, nice.
But it was very interesting. I did found it interesting, very creative as well. But I also think it's what the company values are, because they think or they know it's an issue, and as you said, it's PR. You need to work with that, and all the employees need to think as well as the company is treating this issue, right?
Yeah, no, completely. Yeah, I think you kind of can tell, you can smell bullshit from miles away. So when it's just a PR issue, when it's just a PR motivated change, and it's purely PR and nothing else, it's not going to succeed long term. It's not going to be sustainable. If it's a PR but also a more deeply,
A fundamental issue.
exactly, fundamental intention of improving society, then it has a much higher probability of working long term.
Okay, okay. And I don't know if you want to add something else to your work experience or business consulting, because I have several questions regarding your profile.
No, I think we've covered plenty.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I also think we have been covering good things about business. Yeah. I want to ask you this. What would you say overall is the balance, or why business consulting is so killed in the sense of working on burning out and doing extreme hours? Why would you say it's common in the business consultant world?
I'd say it's common because there is typically a requirement of learning for everybody. For every single project, there is a learning requirement because every project is new, or either is new, or the people is not familiar enough with the industry or the topic or the client. So there is a factor there that it's by definition, the type of work that we do cannot allow us to have experience on every single topic that we will face, because that would require too much time to have been dedicated to different projects. So we will always find new projects that we'll have to learn. And so there's a and that learning is not paid by the client, because why should it? The client is paying you to solve the question, not to have the analysts or consultants or manager or whoever in the team, not for them to learn about you or the industry and whatnot. So that has to go on your own time, and it's not quote unquote billable. So it's not paid. So that part always sort of pushes the time limits. And so that's when the ability to quickly learn and familiarize yourself for a new industry becomes very valuable, in the sense that it will determine somehow your work life balance. So that's one part. The other part, I would say, depends on the culture of the office. And of course, the culture of the firm. But as I was saying before, there's differences in the same firm within different offices. So Wood Mackenzie has a different culture in Mexico City than in Houston, than in New York, etc. So the culture of the office and the style of the manager determines also the work-life balance. There are some boundaries, and there is always an 80-20 to be done. And what I mean by an 80-20 is that there's always uh, an amount of effort that is ideally the 20% of the effort will give you 80% of the results that you want, and the last 20% of the results is going to require a much deeper understanding, a much more deeper analysis, and a much wider information gathering, etc., that just isn't has a diminishing return. So being able to wisely rigorously cut that diminishing return efforts also contributes in the work style and work life balance. Most cultures, most offices will try to strive for the 100% perfectionist and accuracy, trying to get as much as possible, because the overachieving is very well viewed both inside, both competitively with your peers to get promoted, and very well viewed for the client point of view. But in other cultures, in other offices, and in other management styles, they will value the work life balance that you get by focusing on the top 20 priorities that give you the 80% of the result, and then the 20% rest of results opportunistically approaching. And that would might give not the best outcome always, but just good enough to send the same messages, to arrive to the same decisions, and could be sustainable. So in my experience, I have largely done it in that way, in the way that I try to see where to make the cut that efforts are giving me diminishing returns. And by doing that, I've been able to save lots of time and to maintain a very sustainable work life balance. So I think that's why there's very different senses, and very typically are more people are more focused on getting the 100%.
Okay, yeah, I also think it's also a filter, right? The A lot of people will not uh, sustain that lifestyle. Like you were telling me about your brother, he did not wanted to go with that,
Yeah.
and even if you don't want to like accept that style, or maybe you have other options, and I think it's always a deal breaker that, and of course, being having the capabilities of getting that type of job, but also sustaining and going through all these very extreme hours and works, I think is very makes the profile more unique.
That's true, but I think it's a bullshit filter. I don't think people should be filtered in terms of how much stress or pressure or agony they are willing to accept. I think, yeah, I think, as I was saying, just being wise enough to understand where you're getting diminishing returns, I think that's more valuable.
Okay, okay, nice. I just wanted to get out that of my mind. I wanted to know your point of view.
Hmm.
But okay, and one thing I want to ask you, because I typically know that, or I would say the typical way to continue a business consultant career is going and ticking that box of getting your MBA in the USA or maybe in UK or any top university for MBAers. So my question to you is, would you think, because I know that you haven't got an MBA, do you think it's crucial to have an MBA for your career path? Do you think it's something that you need to tick off eventually? Or will you say it's only a boost or a booster that might help you, but it's not 100% required?
I think it's very career dependent. So it's case by case which career path you want. It can or cannot be a great decision. Um, I would say that the trend is that it's less and less required to advance, and having a very expensive MBA is probably long term is probably not going to be required, as most of the academic content that you can get, you can get it for free. Really, you can really learn anything for free on the internet. So that's one big disadvantage that MBAs are getting. But the other part, the networking part and the contacts part, it's increasingly decentralizing. So I think as relationships are built, and contradicting the first part of the big cities we were saying before, but the decentralization of relationship making by going online is probably going to decrease the attractiveness of an MBA over the long term. However, at many firms, it's a required step, and especially if you're coming from chemical engineering and coming from the industry, and if you want to transition into consulting as a experienced hiree, a great way of doing it is going to an MBA. And if you're going to an MBA, you want to go into top GMC, you have to go to the best MBAs in the country. So if you go to the US, you want to go in Ivy League. If you go to London, to England, or to UK, you need to go to either London Business School or London School of Economics, or etc. So you need to go to top companies, because that's the protocol and the way. However, I don't think it's going to be this way in the long term. So yeah.
Yeah, me too. I think university degrees are going to get each time not useless, but not that relevant for your actual field. And actual skills are going to get more important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you for sharing that, because I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of people thinking I gotta eventually make my MBA in order to get my career successful. And I think you are a good example of that not being the case.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I
do
did.
you actually do you plan to eventually study an MBA, or would you say you're already past your let's say your requirements?
I don't plan on doing it. I don't think I need it. I once I achieved project manager position or a management responsibility position, and I consolidated there. There is no need. The jump that I would get from an MBA, I have already managed to do it, and there is plenty of places to be able to do this, and it's going to increase these type of opportunities, and the type of people without an MBA going to the higher places is probably going to increase. So yeah, I don't think I'll do it. I don't think I'll need it.
That's great. Hopefully, you stay there and more people keep your example as a way to go, because not it's not that MBA will bring your career. It's because many of the people, I think, study that because they think it's going to fix or boost artificially their CV or their life, and it's not the case. It's only a tool that is valuable, yes, but it's not going to fix your life. It's not going to land you great jobs, or maybe yes, but will not make you retain your job. It's only a tool that if you use it well, you will take advantage of it, and if you don't use it, you will not be able to get value out of it.
Absolutely, agreed.
Okay, Daniel, and I have one question that I told you I was going to cover, and is about job jumping, because I see your curriculum or your resume, and you have a lot of, let's say, experiences, a lot of companies, a lot of jobs. What would you say to that? Let's say I'm your future uh, boss, and I'm asking you that. Why do you have a lot of changes? Are you not loyal to a company, or do you don't like the jobs? What would you answer in this case?
So what I would generally say is that you need to be really clear on the narrative that explains your history. So each person has different narrative, a different history, and we are storytellers, and we like stories. And through stories, we communicate much more efficient and much better. So in my own experience and in my case, the story that I tell or the way that happened is because of the networking that I created on the first job opportunity that I had. So all of my jumping opportunities that I had resulted of a great networking of people that I worked with within the industry in the first three to 4 years of my employee at SBC. So the partner that pulled me to Ernst and Young was a partner that I worked with at SBC, and then the opportunity of Wood Mackenzie showed up to me because a similar situation developed. A partner from SBC was hired by Wood Mackenzie, and they needed people to create their energy practice, and I worked with him already, and he knew me, and so he presented the opportunity to me. So it's not a matter of me jumping from ship to ship. It's more of a matter of that I created such a strong networking and a close networking of very high achieving people within the industry that reached higher levels in different companies, that the paths were open because of this networking. So it was a different partner pulling me back to work with him instead of me jumping off a ship.
Okay, that's actually a great answer. And well, I don't know because I'm not a recruitant. I don't know what will be the analysis of that answer, but I'm pretty sure that, as you stated, you gotta be honest and tell them the truth. Just
Makes it much better. Yeah,
what's your narrative, and yeah, I think it's way easier rather because I know that you are not changing because it's a boring thing for you or because you want to keep earning more income. It's because you want to create a career path that is successful.
completely.
And talking about career path, Daniel, do you want, or what's your, let's say, middle term goal? Do you want to become a manager, director, a partner? Do you want to open your own business consulting? How do you see yourself in, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
I would like to work for the next 5 to 10 years in consulting because it's a very high paying job, very intellectually rewarding, and very stimulating and challenging, and etc. All of the good things that I have stated before. But after that 5 to 10, I think 5 to 10 is realistic. I am probably going to scale down in terms of intensity and try to go as an advisor kind of way, as an expert advisor. That would be my ideal kind of role. So having that amount of experience working as a sort of external advisor of an expert advisor or a board advisor, something that requires much less time, but grabs a very high value amount of judgment and experience in the interaction. That would be my ideal position. So I see myself as achieving as much as I can in consulting, and then scaling back and pivoting to a more of an external advisor kind of role.
That sounds great. I hope you achieve that, and I'm pretty sure you will. And let's see if I can interview you in 5 to 10 years, and hopefully you tell us much more enriching stories.
Yeah, I hope as well.
So, Daniel, though, that was the interview, and I don't know if you want to add something else or some tips, or shall we pass to the quick questions?
Yeah, quick questions are
Okay, let's see. So let's start with student or study life. So if you could change your syllabus or the course you took in bachelor level university, what would you change or add?
You mean academically, right?
No, yeah. I mean, you can select a course or something, maybe labs, or maybe even make, I don't know, sports mandatory, or going to, I don't know, whatever thing. Let's say that you're redesigning the
Okay.
course or syllabus for yourself. What would you add or remove or change?
I would definitely add more programming or software related skills, or at the very least, something formally in Excel and or Tableau and or something that is very, very useful in the professional career. That one, and I would add more financial subjects because they are universally applied everywhere. So both programming and finance are, I think, the most important parts.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I also think programming is definitely important, and finance maybe, yeah, it's also important. Actually, uh, taking accounting was one of my best courses back in the day, and I still remember that I was wondering why the hell was I taking that. But right now, I really appreciate it.
Exactly. I think we probably were frustrated as it had nothing to do with the core of our career, but in real life, it's just so necessary that it's very useful.
Yeah, exactly. What would you say is something overrated in chemical engineering or in the industry? Let's say, for example, I don't know, going green. You say, nah, that's super overrated because oil and gas is still relevant and we have a lot of products. Or something that you would say, nah, that's something that we say a lot, but it's not actually that important.
So I think the ability to actually design process plans and all of that we work too much into that within academically. The ability to do that, it's very important, but I think it's overrated in the sense that it's much more important to practically do it in an actual job. So one thing is the probability that you will end up doing that, it's very low. But let's say that that's the reason you want to go into chemical engineering, right? So okay, so say that given the probability is low, it makes the importance less. But leaving that aside, the the reality is that once you actually do it, that once you practice and create an actual process and realize how much the reality really affects, you realize that perfecting the design of a process or the mathematics behind the process is not that important. It's much more important to practice, to do it in the reality, and to find that experience and God is probably much more relevant when actually doing it.
Okay, yeah, that's true. I would say actually doing is way better than just learning to do.
Exactly.
Doing stuff is like you shut people's mouth if you do rather than know how to do. This question is very interesting because I don't know the answer. So, Daniel, what would you study other than chemical engineering? If you could go back in time, knowing what you know right now.
I would study behavioral economics. I would.
Wow.
I think it's just such an interesting. How do people behave with money, and how does that shape economics and investing in general? It's just so interesting because I think investing and economics and all of that, it moves the world. The money moves the world, and it's it's not the study of of finance or money, or this. It's just the study of how people behave with money. That's the real reason, the way the stock markets move the way it does, and the way that there's these mini bubbles and there's large bubbles and these crazy movements. So that would be so interesting to go into.
That's interesting. I'm not that into economics, but definitely it's always important that the previous theories will say that the human will make very rational decisions, but
Exactly.
actually the reverse is true. It's much more emotional.
It's all emotional.
Yeah, that's cool. So, do you still use chemical engineering or overall engineering references from university, or do you use no reference at all?
I do use very basic references. So I use mass balances in many of my projects. So to understand a basic mass balance of the process that we're evaluating for an asset that we're evaluating, that is so relevant, and to very quickly understand what the mass balance is very common to use. Energy balances as well, but that's much less detailed because there are so many more variables that is not required to be modeled in detail. But more complex than that is very unlikely.
Okay, okay. What was the subject that you suffered the most, or that you had the worst? I don't know. how to say it, overall enjoyment that you hated?
Oof. A singular subject.
Well, you can say block of subjects or
I hated the writing ones, the beginning ones. You had to write a bunch of essays. I can't remember the name. Taev was it? I
yeah.
really hated those, but that's why, because I sucked at writing, and I think it's very important. You need to communicate clearly written any at any job. So that's very important. But I really hated it. I think you hate what you're bad at. So if you want to like something, become good at it. You're gonna like it.
True, yeah. Especially if you don't like it, because sometimes you may be bad, but you want to improve and you will enjoy it. Like cooking. If you want to get
Exactly.
better at cooking, you will enjoy the process of
Working
improvement.
Yeah, going to the gym, doing
Yeah.
some swimming, running, just become better at it. You'll be enjoying it in no time.
Okay, Daniel. So right now, the pandemic, as you know, has been hitting a lot of people, especially young graduates. Lots of students have been losing internships, and worst, lots of students that are either recent graduates or have been looking for a job in one semester or 1 year and haven't had any luck. So, what will be your tip to get a job? If you were them back in, let's say, you are recently graduate looking for a job, what will be your best advice?
So I would reach my network in terms of I realize going out of university you don't have a large professional network, but you always know people, and this is in my experience, the best way of getting the best jobs was through people I knew. So reach on your network, reach on your LinkedIn, reach out to people that you don't know, and present yourself. Be proactive and try to increase your network. Through your network is probably the best way of getting opportunities. Besides that, I would say that you you're going to require some patience because processes are much slowly moving at these stages, because there is so much uncertainty and so many firms are having volatility in their performance, so they might have recoveries, they might not have as strong recoveries as expected, so processes are going to be delayed. So patience is probably going to be required. And the third thing that I might add is yeah, not sure actually. I lost my train of thought. I had a third thing, but yeah, let's just go with it.
And I think I also recommend the same: make use of your network, and more importantly, work on it. And I say this also for people that's starting, start working from now on in increasing your networking, and not only increasing in numbers, but also in interactions and quality interactions.
Mm, definitely agreed.
Okay, let's change to professional life. And I have just a curiosity. What was your first non-chemie job, if you had?
I worked with my parents' family business when I was in high school, so I would say that not sure if that counts as a formal job. If not that one, then my first consulting job at my last year of university.
I think the very first one was the one I wanted to hear, and I was pretty sure it was going to be something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, and what this is a great question, and it's focused towards students, but I want to change it. Then, what would you expect from a recent graduate from chemical engineering if he wanted to go into business consulting? So let's say you told us that you were working with those two analysts. What would you expect them to do, or how? What is the best profile or description that you can give to the HR people so they look for that?
So I would say that the first thing would be the core consulting skills, the strong skills, quote unquote, not the soft ones. So the analytics, problem structuring, communication skills, both written and spoken. Those would be the basics. But apart from that, something actionable would be to show interest, to show motivation, to have researched both the firm and the type of role that consulting is. So someone, a successful candidate, will not only have those core skills that we have discussed throughout the interview, but he or she would have understood what consulting means would have clear motivations as to why they want to go in, and would show for it by asking the correct questions and asking as much questions as possible and being driven and to show that hunger for going in, which is typically as people, when people fit the profile, they are very driven and they show that hunger. So I would say that that's a very good um, quality to action on.
Yeah, it's true. Actually, going for more without being asked and doing more without like pressuring people, it's always a great asset or to have in the workplace.
Yeah.
Okay, so this one is interesting. Do you consider yourself a leader? Yes or no?
Yes, I do consider
Okay.
myself a leader. I have to. If
Yeah, I will consider yourself a leader as well. Now, how do you become a leader?
wow, that's a very broad question, but I would say it depends on what kind of leader you want to become. But in the same train of thought that we have discussed here, I would say that you would need to balance out the skill sets of the very core consulting that we have said over and over with the more people managing and selling skills that is required to create new business. So in consulting, selling new projects becomes a very senior responsibility, but it's a necessary ability that you require to become a leader, because new business fits the whole thing. So being able to sell and being able to manage people are probably two of the hardest skills that a leader requires to develop once you have developed a strong um, foundations.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting way to see that. And yes, I will say also it depends on which type of leader you want to become, which I will say depends on your person or type.
Yeah, on your personality as well. Yeah, completely.
Okay, so what subject of chemical engineering you use the most? I think you already commented on that, but just for the sake of repeating that.
Yeah, it's probably mass balance, but I would say that momentum transfer and heat transfer, both not in terms of the academic context, but the modeling exercise that we had the chance to do in our subject. So you in Tec de Monterrey, you would require to develop an Excel model in either of those two with a particular professor, if you remember. But that specific modeling, oof, I think that's so much useful in the professional life, because Excel is your life. I mean, you use Excel for everything. So modeling, being successful at Excel modeling, will get you 80% of the way in most projects.
Okay, that was pretty straightforward. So great. And this question is also interesting. How often do you use the Laplace transform, or do you ever use it at work?
Never, not once. However, it's good that I know what it is, because I have found jokes about it, and other chemical engineering people within the firm use stuff like that, very very specific stuff, just to make jokes other people don't understand. So that's good.
That's talking about the filters. That will be a great filter. And imagine being there in your business case, an interview, and tell him, "Okay, you need to do the Laplace transform for the following process," and you
they
will be, "Oh, fuck."
Yeah, the interview will just completely panic on the spot, or laugh and understand that's what you're talking about, which would be a great sign.
Exactly. That will be a good filter. That it will be pretty interesting to see the answer of the student. Oh, not the student, the one that's applying.
Actually really fun to be on this side of the interviewing process, because you get to do all those. I mean, I create my own interview case. I create it with whatever crazy shit I want, or with whatever things that apply to reality or things that do not. And you want to test him. So it's such an interesting experiment to create, and you get to interview so many candidates that you can test different things. And yeah, that's one of the perks.
Yeah, that's also funny. You have a nice time, and I'm pretty sure you can also learn from other fellow interviewees.
All the time. Yeah.
Okay, and what do I? Okay, This one is great because I think that you are in an industry that is forcing this type of changes. So, what do you think is the future of chemical engineering as the industry 4.0 is starting to develop?
I think in by the risk of repeating a little bit of what I was saying before, I think the future is just going to be very focused in climate change. I think it's just going to be what is the best way of creating all of the chemical processes and and engineering processes, and what is the best way of creating this in a non-carbon way, in a neutral carbon emissions way. How best to create circular economies, how best to use the resources that you have the most efficiently, and what is the best way to reach this carbon neutral society that we want. So it's probably all going to be around that, and that probably replicates not only in the core chemical engineering process, but in all of the processes. As I was saying before, there is a broad application of this energy transition towards all of the natural resources sector. So it's probably the same for chemical engineering. It's going to be for momentum transfer, for heat transfer, for mass transfer. It's going to apply differently in each of these large core fields, but it's probably going to apply in all of them.
Okay, that's a nice analysis. Hopefully, we get through this without a lot of work losses, but let's see how it develops.
Yeah, no, I think I am very optimistical about society's capabilities of adapting. I have seen, studying history and understanding the way societies behave, that people are just very um, capable of adapting and changing the way they live in order to survive. However, I think there are levels of survival that we're willing to accept that we shouldn't, and I think that where lies the problem.
That's true. We should not accept the status quo, always do more. Okay, talking about this or being optimistic, do you think the world is going to last enough before we destroy it? Or do you think we are going to maybe have the solution eventually and end up with our normal lives?
I think it's society will not destroy the world. I think what we're doing is we're destroying ourselves. The world will adapt. Whether we survive or not, the world will adapt, and there will be species that will adapt and will survive if the climate change is not reversed. So, for your first question, the world will not be destroyed. It's going to remain. The question is whether society will remain or not. And so that goes to your second question. Your second question was, if society remains, is it going to be the same or not? I think it definitely will not be the same. We cannot sustain a level of consumption that we're doing in the way we're doing it for much longer. At least we cannot sustain the level of consumption of developed countries to be replicated by the rest of the world, by undeveloped countries. It's just not sustainable, and that has to change. So the way we live, it's definitely going to change. I don't think um, long term, it's the world will not be able to sustain society consuming as much as developed countries consume for the emerging economies. So the way that changes is that not only emerging economies do not consume as much as developed countries, but developed countries stop consuming and start well, not consuming and not doing as many stupid shit as people are doing. So sorry, I'm not sure if I can swear here,
It's fine, it's fine.
or if that counts as a share. So as a swears, but going back, I think the idea is that definitely cannot live the way we're normally living. We have to just I would say one thing: just walk. People should just walk more. People should live in smaller places and just stop driving as much. Just walk, take a bike. That would be a big change.
Okay, okay. And what do you think about eating beef?
Yeah. I personally I love beef, so that's very hard for me to answer. I realize it's one of the one of the large drivers of carbon emissions. But then there is an internal conflict in my heart because I really love it. I am very, very fond of beef, and it's one of my favorite meals. So what I would say is that I would push, and I realize it's very hard to escalate, but I would push sustainable ways of growing beef, just free or grass-fed beef. That if there is a way of producing beef in a way that the soil is not permanently damaged, I think there is, and you just have free beef, free cows, um, grass fed, and they also contribute to the sustainability of the soil. I think that that way, it's a great way of producing meat for consumption. However, I realize that there is a scalability problem there, and there's not enough places everywhere to do that. But I think there is a way of doing it. I'm not That's not my area of expertise, but if there would be a way, I would definitely support it. And yeah, the lab created meat, I am very doubtful of that because it uses so many vegetable oils that are not great for the body. So I'm not sure that's the long term answer, but yeah, at least it's something.
Okay. I love how you were like trying to solve the problem and then discussing yourself the solutions. But that's great. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Okay, so let's pass to random fact questions. And what do you use to get active at the workplace? Coffee, beer, tea, water, a
Definitely coffee all
app?
the time. Definitely coffee. On our office, it's a great setting. We get to drink beers if we want to later on Fridays, especially. They give us pizza if we want. They give us some snacks, and they just treat us like freaking kings. So that's one of the perks of the industry. It's just so much. They give you so much. Once like every 2 months, they hire a masseuse to give you messages, masajes,
Not a
masseuse.
year. Yeah, I don't know how to say it. Sounds kind of
Yeah.
French.
So yeah, so these perks, mostly coffee, but the interactions and the ability to have once in a while a beer, just it's a great thing.
That massage thing, I also think is also great. I think it
Oh
really
yeah,
works.
definitely.
Okay, and what hobbies do you have, and which hobbies do you want to maybe develop or at least have, like you see yourself having in the future, like playing an instrument or something like that?
So I think you want to be a renaissance man. You want to be great at professional life, but you also want to be great at performing physically. So you want to train strength training and do endurance training. So on this pandemic we were discussing before the podcast, I've been dedicated to much more fitness. So I've been doing like 1 hour and a half or 2 hours of workout, both in the gym and then playing squash every day. So that's been great, and eating well. And I think you have to have some artistic hobby as well. I play the piano. I really like that. I should be practicing more, but sometimes uh, I don't find enough motivation. Although I think motivation is something that comes most of the time after you take action. So as we were discussing before, if you go to the gym, you start taking action and then you get motivated. So you don't have to wait to be motivated to do something. But at the moment, I think with the physical activity and professional development is just about enough. If involving a third, I would say artistic or spiritual development would be great, although I don't have any of those at the moment.
Okay, yeah, I think like you we gotta become more like the Renaissance man that has a lot of inquiry in the areas of knowledge and sports, music,
See,
also.
artistic, spirituality,
Yeah, exactly.
family, relationships.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, I miss the gym because they closed it since the pandemic. But I have been doing yoga, which has been working for me, and doing some hiking. I haven't been able to play the saxophone as often as I wanted to, but it's something I need to work on.
So I think those hobbies, they have an effect on your brain, and they can reflect on the way your performance works on other parts of life. So it's very important to approach the as a holistic approach to have different sense because of that improvement in different areas of life.
Okay, yeah, that's great input from you, Daniel. So those were the quick questions and answer. Really glad that you answered them without problems. Sometimes we have some guests that have problems answering, but that was like great. So
Thank
let's
you.
pass to the closure. Daniel, I don't know if you want to add something like a closing statement for all those listening, maybe students. Lots of I was checking the analytics. There's a lot of people from 21 to 34 years old listening to the podcast. It's a 80% male, 20% female distribution. So I don't know if you want to address them.
Yeah, what I would say is, well, I am at the same age cohort as you have described. We both are. And I say that apart from all of the professional and, and personal topics that we have discussed, the other thing that I would say is very, very important is to achieve financial independence. So at that age, one of the most important things you can do is start investing both in yourself, in learning, in courses, in getting new hobbies, but also if you have and if you're capable of actually investing in the stock markets or the bond markets, or just like create as fast as you can a way to start investing in your future, in your retirement, in your financial independence. So when I say retirement, I don't mean that you don't work. I mean that you can leave work if you want, so you are independent. So I think at that age, the other thing apart from the professional things that we have discussed, I would say, is start investing as fast as you can, because later on you'll be thanking yourself.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. That's a great tip. Actually, investment. The earlier you do it, the better because the earnings you get reinvested. So on
Exactly.
the long term, it's
Compound,
great.
compound effect, which is a very used term, cliche term, but it's just so powerful. That it's very important to remark.
That's true. Compound effect is, as you stated, you do small things and eventually they add up into a very great, epic stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, Daniel. Well, thank you for being here. It's been more than 2 hours, so I really appreciate your time. I know that
Yeah.
you're currently on vacations, so thank you
Going
for.
down.
I really enjoy it, and I'm pretty sure that all our fans out there will enjoy it as well. So, guys, take care. See you in the following episodes. Bye bye. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And before you go, I will really appreciate it if you take the time to share this podcast with your fellow colleagues, classmates, friends, or really anyone that might be interested on the topic of chemical engineering and its related fields. If you found this content helpful and valuable, please consider subscribing, rating, and leaving a review. Thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot.